Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we launch into our tale, I'm curious, where are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. And here's a question for you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you discovered a wife's infidelity? Perhaps it happened to you, a friend, or someone you know. If you have a story, feel free to share it in the comments. I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Now let's get started with the narrative. Before all the turmoil erupted, before I was thrust into that courtroom with my entire future hanging precariously in the balance, there was a time when life felt far simpler, far more predictable. Stonemore was never a place that promised thrilling adventures, but it had always offered me a comforting sense of stability, even if that stability was built upon unwavering routine and a considerable amount of trust. Back in our high school days, Bruce and I shared a unique kind of camaraderie, one forged in the reckless escapades of our youth. He wasn't the straight-laced preacher he is now. He was just another kid yearning to break free from his father's impossibly high expectations. I can still vividly recall the night we decided to break into Mr. Greenlee's scrapyard with the audacious goal of hot wiring an old Pontiac just to prove we could. We spectacularly failed, nearly getting ourselves thrashed when the old man's dog came bounding after us, and we ended up spending the rest of the night huddled in a ditch, laughing until our sides ached. That was Bruce. Hesitant perhaps, but always willing, always a step behind me, but never afraid to follow. Things began to change significantly after he met Cheryl at Bible college. His letters, yes, back then Bruce actually wrote letters, started sounding less like personal updates and more like sermons. He stopped swearing, began saying grace before every meal, and most dishearteningly traded our usual Friday night beer runs for lengthy theological debates. I initially dismissed it as a phase, believing he'd eventually lighten up, shed his self-righteous facade, and we'd return to being just two ordinary guys who had each other's backs. But when he returned to Stonemore with Cheryl, ready to embark on a life as a man of faith, I realized something profound. I had lost my best friend to something I couldn't possibly compete with: piety. Mr. Erickson, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt. The judge's face had turned a blotchy shade of crimson, her expression so exaggerated I had to consciously suppress the urge to laugh. Mr. Young, control your client, she snapped, clearly exasperated. I'd heard that warning before, but when swearing feels as natural as breathing, and the person in charge seems like a bit of a joke, staying quiet isn't exactly easy. People often tell me I curse more than anyone they know, and perhaps they're right. It's not a conscious decision, it just happens. Before I could retort, my attorney, Bert Young, who, if everything unfolded according to plan, would soon be my partner at his firm, shot me a look that needed no translation. Shut your mouth unless you want to spend the night in a holding cell. Even the court reporter was struggling to maintain a straight face, likely anticipating an onslaught of expletives from me across the courtroom. 3 people sat rigidly, studiously avoiding my gaze. Bruce, my former best friend, looked utterly worn down. Robin, my soon-to-be ex-wife, carried the unmistakable weight of humiliation on her face. And Cheryl, Bruce's wife, radiated pure fury, likely because every sordid detail of their private mess was now laid bare for public consumption. How had I ended up in this predicament, being lectured by a judge I barely respected, in a courtroom filled with people I once considered friends? Let's rewind. My name is Jack Erickson. I'm 32 years old and work as a foreman in the city maintenance department here in Stonemore, Colorado. I took the job 2 days after high school and have never left. In the winter, I'm responsible for clearing the snow-covered roads. In the summer, I handle whatever needs fixing. Robin, when she isn't busy feigning piety as a perfect churchgoer, works a few hours at the local chapel, mostly, I suspect, to justify her relative inactivity at home. Our department is divided into 4 sectors, each overseen by a supervisor and a foreman. I never aspired to be a supervisor. It wasn't my kind of thing. I don't have a college degree, and even if I did, I wouldn't stoop to the necessary flattery to climb that ladder. On that particular Monday night, a fierce summer storm had torn through town, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Fallen branches, scattered debris, and flooded streets. I had 6 crews operating dump trucks, 2 vacuum trucks to unclog storm drains, and 4 street sweepers working around the clock. By the afternoon, I was already inspecting the back alleys, realizing that lawn mowing would have to wait. Robin and I resided in a modest 4-bedroom house in an older but decent neighborhood. It wasn't exactly luxurious, but it was far from a rough territory. We had wonderful neighbors, Tom and Jerry McBain next door, Ron and Cindy behind us, and Bruce and Cheryl Harris directly behind them. Bruce had been my closest friend since middle school. We never even bothered with fences. That's how close we all were. Bruce and I had been inseparable as children. I'd often dragged him into more trouble than he could handle, much to the chagrin of his ultra-religious parents, who detested me. Not that I paid it any mind. He grew up to be a preacher. I grew up actively avoiding church altogether. Robin, on the other hand, never missed a Sunday service. Bruce met Cheryl at Bible college. She possessed the kind of striking beauty that could grace the cover of a magazine, coupled with the devotion of a saint. He was my polar opposite in almost every conceivable way, yet I would have done anything for him, or so I believed. Tuesday night, I arrived home utterly exhausted, ready to reheat Sunday's meatloaf for dinner. Not that I minded the routine, but Robin hadn't prepared a fresh meal in months. I considered cracking open a 12-pack of beer, but a red mark on the calendar served as a stark reminder: emergency standby. 1 beer with dinner was the limit. Robin showered while I ate, her demeanor as distant as ever. Our marriage had devolved into little more than forced small talk and the occasional lackluster Saturday night routine, missionary style no less. I had checked out mentally months ago. By 10 o'clock, I was debating whether to turn in early when my phone buzzed. Likely Bruce, ready to complain about the Rockies' latest game or request a favor for his church. It wasn't him. City Dispatch reported a water main break near Birchwood Mall. I grabbed my gear, briefly considered informing Robin, then decided against it. It didn't seem like she cared where I was anyway. At the yard, I prepped a dump truck, hooked up a backhoe, and rendezvoused with my crew, guys from every sector, plus a water supervisor and his team. By the time we arrived, the street was already a lake, so we immediately called in a vacuum truck to begin draining the mess. By 1 a.m, I had the pavement broken open. By 3, the pipe was exposed. By 9:30, the repair was complete. By noon, we were ready for backfilling. I got everything back to the yard by 1 p.m, utterly exhausted but satisfied. At 1:45, I pulled into my driveway, finally off duty until Friday. The house was quiet. Robin was gone, off doing whatever she did all day, which certainly wasn't housework. I grabbed a beer, made myself a sandwich, and then I heard it. A low moan, loud, intense, and unmistakable. I froze, my grip tightening around the bottle. The sound was unmistakably coming from upstairs. So that's why you've been so distant, I muttered under my breath, reaching into the coat closet. My fingers curled around my Kimber 45, the cool metal a stark contrast to my pounding heart. I crept up the stairs. The master bedroom was empty, the bathroom nothing. 2 doors down, the guest room door was shut. At least she had the decency to keep her affairs out of our bed. I kicked the door open, tool ready, nothing. One option remained, her so-called craft room. I braced myself, imagining some random guy behind her, his hands gripping her waist. My grip on the tool tightened as I kicked the door open. Empty, but the noise was deafening. Then I saw it, the open window. I stepped forward, expecting to find Robin entangled with some lowlife in our backyard. What I saw was far worse. Tom and Brenda McBain, brother and sister, going at it like they weren't related, right by their pool. My stomach churned. Brenda had harbored a crush on me since she was 12. Now she was in college and, well, she'd certainly grown into herself. But that didn't change the fact that I was witnessing outright incest. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Then I noticed movement in the window across the yard. I followed Brenda's gaze. Bruce undressed on top of someone, not Cheryl, Robin, my wife. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Holy hell, I roared. Everything stopped. Brenda and Tommy scrambled inside, still undressed, their shame barely registering. I turned back, my tools shaking in my grip, but Bruce's window was now empty. You cheating light! My voice cracked with pure rage as I stormed downstairs. In the den, I grabbed my Mossberg bullpup and loaded it with 20-gauge buckshot. Bruce was a dead man. Robin was done. Hell, even Cheryl's cat and parakeet weren't safe. I stomped toward the door, ready to kick it in and turn them both into Swiss cheese. But halfway down the driveway, I stopped, breathing heavily, the rifle still gripping my hand. Everything clicked. The messy house, the frozen dinners, the lack of affection, the constant long showers. It all made sense. I climbed into my truck, slammed the door shut, and tore out of the driveway, heading straight for Lowe's. My thoughts were racing, each one more infuriating than the last. She didn't cook because Bruce had drained her. She didn't clean because she was too busy playing house with him. But the real question gnawed at me. Why? Why betray me? Why throw everything away? At Lowe's, I grabbed 3 new lock sets, barely registering the familiar faces around me. Jeannie from the paint section waved, but I barely nodded in response. Small talk wasn't on my list of priorities. Back home, I spotted Tommy and Brenda loitering near my driveway, both looking like children caught sneaking out past curfew. Brenda attempted a weak smile. Mr. Erickson, we didn't mean to. I cut her off with a cold stare. I don't care what you two do. Screw each other until you fall apart. It's got nothing to do with me. They scurried off, though Brenda cast a lingering glance at my hips before disappearing inside. I dropped the locks on the counter, grabbed my toolbox, and headed for the front door to start replacing them. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, my entire body tensed. Bruce, sitting at my table. I stopped cold. What the hell are you doing in my house? His expression was calm, too calm. I came to talk as a friend. I let out a sharp, bitter, humorless laugh. A friend? You mean the kind that screws my wife behind my back? Jack, let's not turn this into something worse. Oh, you're absolutely right, I said, sliding a butcher knife across the table toward him. Pick it up. Go on, Bruce. You talk about faith all the time. How about you meet your maker? His face lost all color before he shot out of his seat, making a beeline for the door. On the porch, he turned back. We've been through a lot, man. Are you really throwing away our friendship over this? I gritted my teeth, tightening my grip on the tool at my hip. I lost 2 people today, but the more I think about it, the less it feels like a loss. He hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. Robin's scared to come over. She's got 5 minutes if she wants any shot at saving what's left of this marriage. She'd better get here. Bruce nodded once before scurrying off. And like clockwork, 4 minutes later, I heard soft sniffling outside. Robin walked up the sidewalk, her eyes red, her face streaked with tears. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. Her bottom lip trembled. Jack, I love you. I don't want anyone but you. I let out a humorless chuckle. Funny way of showing it. Let's take this inside. No need to put on a public performance. She followed me in and perched on the love seat, her hands clasped as if praying for a miracle. Can you sit with me? Not a chance. I wasn't in the mood for dramatic pauses, so I cut straight to the chase. How long has this been going on? She hesitated. Jack, he's my friend. Friends don't sleep with each other's wives, I stated flatly. It's just, Jack, she whispered, I still love you. I scoffed. Yeah, and I love steak, but if it makes me sick, I sure as hell won't eat it again. There's no reason to be mad, she pleaded. You still have me. No, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I had you. You threw that away. Her voice wavered. We can still be together. She hesitated, glancing at the clock. Keep sleeping with Bruce. I blinked. Come again? He says I can still take care of your needs once or twice a week. I stared at her, struggling to believe what I'd just heard. Then I let out a dry chuckle. Well, aren't you too generous? But I think I'll find someone else to handle my needs. Her eyes darkened. No, you're mine. No one else should touch you. I shook my head, my patience snapping. Not for long. Ex-wife suits you better. Don't talk like that, she begged. I love you and Bruce, but only for sex. You just need to understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. You want the best of both worlds. You want me for security and him for fun. It's not like that, she protested. Then explain it to me. She checked the clock again. Bruce wants me back in 3 minutes. My jaw clenched. Are you hearing yourself? Do you even realize how insane you sound? Tears welled in her eyes. You've never talked to me like this before. What happened to you? I asked. Oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that I worked a 36-hour shift, came home exhausted, and found my wife screwing my best friend. She let out a choked sob, backing toward the door. That's it, I said, my voice flat. Go to him. Go get what you really want. She hesitated. I don't see why we can't keep things as they are. You're barely home. I can be his while you're at work, and 4 or 5 nights a week. Screw you, Robin. I slammed the door so hard the walls shook. Go enjoy your damn cake. I stood there for a long moment, breathing heavily, my heart pounding. But I wasn't about to sit around drowning in self-pity. I changed every lock, reset the garage code, and by 4 p.m., exhaustion finally caught up with me. I collapsed onto the couch, flipping on the TV. Jerry Springer, I muttered, letting out a dry chuckle before sleep overtook me. When I woke up, it was past 9 and someone was knocking. I yanked the door open, ready to unleash hell on Robin, but instead I found myself staring at Cheryl Harris. Oh, it's you, I sighed. If you're here for Robin's stuff, it's not packed yet. Her expression was tight. Jack, let her come back. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. And here I thought you were about to ask for something reasonable. I moved to shut the door, but she wedged her hand in. Jack, why are you doing this? She's hurting. I crossed my arms. She made her choice. I'm stepping aside. She can't stay with us, Cheryl argued. We have an image to uphold. I scoffed. Maybe you should have thought about that before dragging her into whatever twisted little arrangement you and Bruce have going on. Cheryl's eyes narrowed. Why can't she just stay here? I let out an incredulous laugh. Are you serious? She chose Bruce over me, and the best part, you don't even care. She still loves you, Cheryl pressed. We all love you, Jack. My jaw tightened. Bruce is dead to me. So is she. You don't mean that, I smirked. Oh, but I do. Cheryl inhaled sharply. She's still willing to take care of you, you know. I clapped my hands together mockingly. Oh, so let me get this straight. I pay all the bills, she keeps screwing you two, and in return, I get a half-hearted tug once a week. Meanwhile, Bruce gets his little harem and I foot the bill. I stepped closer, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Or do I at least get some quality time with you? She sneered. Sorry, Jack. I'm a one-man woman. I chuckled dryly. Man, I'd love to meet one of those. Guess I'll have to go find her myself. I pointed to the curb. Tell Robin her junk will be out there in an hour. Cheryl's expression darkened. Stop acting like a caveman. Bruce and I have reputations to protect. I smirked. Sounds like your problem. I slammed the door and headed to the kitchen. Bacon sounded good. Screw their reputation. They actually thought I'd just roll over and accept this. Not happening. Make them suffer. The phrase looped in my head. I grabbed my phone and called a guy from work. His divorce had been brutal. His wife had been screwing her own brother. Real-life Jerry Springer stuff. He gave me the number of a law firm that specialized in making sure men didn't get screwed over. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. By new. I had an appointment. While I waited, I packed Robin's stuff, dumped it on the porch, and slid her car keys under the mat. No excuses for her to knock. Then I went to the bank, canceled the credit cards, closed the joint account, and opened a new one in my name. The banker mentioned Robin had a separate card. No problem. I had them redirect the bill to Bruce's address. At 1 p.m., I entered the legal establishment hoping to secure the services of David Crosby, renowned for his ability to dismantle opposing counsel. Instead, I encountered Bert, a youthful, disheveled individual who appeared as though he hadn't encountered a razor in weeks. Despite his unkempt appearance, his professional track record was flawless. He briefly reviewed my documents, summoned his paralegal, and swiftly issued a series of directives. She departed and returned shortly thereafter, carrying a substantial volume of paperwork. Bert reclined in his office chair and addressed Mr. Erickson with a self-assured smirk, stating, I believe we can secure everything you desire, and while we're at it, put that clergyman in his place. Mr. Erickson's gaze intensified as he inquired, Do you possess any photographic or video evidence? Bert shook his head in the negative, but added, The neighborhood children witnessed the events. I simply want her removed, Erickson declared. Perusing the files, Bert nodded and remarked, That will suffice. We will proceed with expediency. After explaining the legal documentation, he presented me with a checklist, most of which I had already completed. Following the payment of his retainer fee, I returned to my residence to recuperate. Upon my return, Robin's belongings were gone, and a note was affixed to the door. I detached it, entered my home, and relaxed on the sofa. The Jerry Springer show was airing, prompting a wry smile from me. The timing seemed fitting. The note contained precisely what I had anticipated. Robin's plea for reconciliation, with no mention of severing ties with Bruce. Bert and I had mutually agreed that both she and Bruce should be formally served on Sunday at their place of worship. The prospect was too appealing to forgo, and I resolved to attend purely for the spectacle. My answering machine was blinking erratically, displaying over 50 messages. I purged them all that evening. After a few beverages, I finally achieved a deep and undisturbed slumber. The following morning, I set out to dismantle Bruce's reputation. I contacted the city's accounting department. My colleagues had delivered free construction aggregate to Bruce's church, and I possessed the requisite receipts as proof. Janice assured me that the invoice would be recorded as outstanding. Bruce was about to receive a collection notice for $7,500. Subsequently, I casually inquired with the supervisor of the water department whether Bruce's church possessed a compliant water meter. They did not, which necessitated a replacement fee of $1,200. Bruce remained oblivious to the extent to which I had previously shielded him. That, however, was about to change. Make them suffer, I resolved. I will drive that creep into bankruptcy. By midday, I received the anticipated telephone call. "What in the blazes are you doing, Jack?" Bruce growled into the receiver. I maintained an even tone, replying, "I have no idea what you are referring to." The inspector states I must demolish my entire parking lot. You assured me it would be acceptable. I smirked, responding, "Oops, I suppose I neglected to submit some documentation. However, rest assured I will be reprimanded." "I hope they dismiss you," he retorted. At that precise moment, my supervisor entered my office, already surmising the subject of my conversation. He leaned against my desk with a knowing grin, saying, "Jack, regarding that missing paperwork, remind me to place a scathing notation in your file." I chuckled. "I will need a sticky note to remind myself. Just ensure it does not recur." Bruce practically shrieked on the other end. "Oh, some reprimand, Jack. He didn't even find you out." "Indeed," I replied, leaning back in my chair, still grinning. "But he did process my receipts, so anticipate a bill." Bruce abruptly terminated the call. The remainder of my day proceeded uneventfully until I visited Mob's bar for a few drinks. Mob's was a popular establishment frequented by city employees and law enforcement officers. By 11 o'clock, half the patrons in the bar had been apprised of my narrative, either directly from me or through others. Thus, a full-scale harassment campaign was initiated. One of my police associates jested that Bruce might find himself subjected to more frequent traffic stops. A firefighter friend decided that Bruce's church was overdue for a fire safety inspection, remarking, "These places of worship invariably have code violations. We are generally lenient, but Tony will wish to safeguard the congregation." Sheila Torres from the county clerk's office smirked. "I would not be surprised if an anomaly surfaces in Bruce's property tax records, perhaps an outstanding balance. Make them suffer." By Saturday morning, I was in my garage, attempting to engage in some restoration work. My backyard offered no respite. Between the partially clad individuals next door and the indiscreet neighbors behind them, tranquility was non-existent. I was meticulously refurbishing a cabinet when I sensed I was being observed. I knew precisely who it was, Robin. I turned, prepared to dismiss her summarily, but instead my gaze met Brenda's. "Hello, Mr. Erickson," she said, her voice excessively sweet. "What can I do for you, Brenda?" She handed me a USB drive, her fingers lingering for a moment longer than necessary. I forced my attention away from her minimally clad physique and back to her face. "I recorded something last week," she explained. "I thought it might be beneficial to your case." "I will examine it," I replied. She turned to depart, but glanced back, her eyes unreadable. "It is my pleasure to assist you, Jack. Have a pleasant day." I frowned. She had never addressed me by anything other than Mr. Erickson previously. Pocketing the drive, I completed mowing my lawn. Throughout this entire endeavor, I could hear Robin wailing from Bruce's balcony. I had hoped the Tom and Jerry duo would summon the authorities. Instead, their family retreated indoors, evading the unfolding drama. By 5 o'clock, I was at Joe's Pit BBQ, indulging in their renowned ribs. As I was dining, John, Cheryl's brother, entered. He was an engineer with the City County Roads Department. We had collaborated on numerous occasions, but I was uncertain of his stance in this matter. I kept my head down, hoping to remain unnoticed. However, after placing his takeout order, John paused at my table. "Jack," he greeted. I looked up. "John, it's been a while." He let out a weary sigh. "Been busy. Every time we clean up after a storm, 2 more roll in." "Yes, we are opening bids next week for the Johnson Street Bridge," I remarked. "Your crew should secure some work." "That would be advantageous," John admitted. "Got 100 potholes and 3 compromised irrigation systems to repair." We exchanged pleasantries for a brief period before he broached the subject at hand. "I heard my brother-in-law's church is experiencing some significant drainage issues," he stated, his tone casual but pointed. "Sounds costly," I smirked. "Yes, I suppose it would be." John clapped me on the shoulder, adding, "Glad someone is finally making that scoundrel pay. Remind me never to cross you." He departed with his food. I concluded my meal, procured a bottle of vodka from Chang's Liquor, and headed home. Just as I settled in, I remembered Brenda's USB drive. Plugging it in, I opened the Soul file. The screen immediately displayed Brenda, leaning out of her bedroom window, her fingers engaged in strenuous activity between her legs. I winced. Then I heard my lawnmower. She had been observing me as I mowed the lawn while engaged in that act. "Jesus Christ," Tommy exclaimed as he entered. "Old man, are you Jack Turba?" I felt an urge to vomit. Brenda moaned, "I am. Tommy, pretend you are him. Screw me like you mean it." I fast-forwarded. I had endured enough of their depraved content. Then I understood why she had given me the video. Tommy zoomed in on Bruce, Robin, and Cheryl engaged in an intimate encounter on their terrace, 50 yards from my residence, directly within my sightline. But now, I possessed irrefutable evidence. I made a telephone call. The video would serve another purpose before we ever reached the courtroom. Make them suffer. For the first time in years, I awoke early on a Sunday, prepared for religious services, coffee, a bagel, and then off to Vinewood Presbyterian. I arrived 20 minutes prior to the scheduled service. In the parking lot, I observed 3 other gentlemen who, like myself, were not regulars. Inside, I took a seat in the 3rd pew, just another anonymous face in the congregation. I caught the eye of Robert Donovan, the church's audio-visual technician. He had been part of my street maintenance crew and owed me a favor. I examined the church bulletin. The opportune moment would arise immediately following the collection. The choir entered. Cheryl and Robin walked in together, entirely unaware of what was to unfold. Bruce followed, pontificating about forgiveness. I nearly chuckled. He was aware of my presence. Amusingly, he had neglected the 7th commandment. We sang a few hymns, and then the offering plates were circulated, eventually reaching Robert's hands. He would tally the cash while Bruce delivered his sermon, ensuring the secretary could deposit it later. Then came the moment I had eagerly awaited. Bruce stood at the pulpit, welcoming new attendees. As was customary, he invited visitors to introduce themselves. My 3 companions rose and proceeded forward. A child seated next to me nudged my arm, saying, "Am I new too, mister?" His mother promptly smacked him on the back of the head. I chuckled. Bruce smiled and shook hands with my associates. A young brunette spoke first. "I am here to see Cheryl Harris." Cheryl frowned, stepping forward. The next individual, a red-haired young man with pimples, took the microphone. "I am here to see Robin Erickson." Robin hesitated before joining Cheryl. Then Neil Young, the son of the parish leader, took the microphone. "Bruce Harris, Cheryl Harris, and Robin Erickson, you have been served." They thrust legal documents into the hands of the trio. Bruce's face turned crimson. He snatched his microphone back, exclaiming, "Why have you defiled my sanctuary?" Precisely on cue, Robert activated the projector. The church screen illuminated, displaying Bruce, Cheryl, and Robin in a state of undress on their terrace. Gasps erupted. At least 5 elderly ladies fumbled for their cellular devices. The police would be arriving shortly. Then, without warning, an elderly woman hobbled forward and struck Bruce in the groin with her cane. Utter pandemonium ensued. Robin shrieked. Suddenly she turned and saw me. She ran directly towards me. Bruce, still doubled over in pain, was not going anywhere, not even if the Nazis were approaching to imprison him in an oven. I bolted for the exit, only to collide with a police officer. A few days later, after the situation had stabilized and the district attorney declined to press charges against me, Bruce had a privacy fence installed, identical to the one mandated by his recently granted restraining order. I was prohibited from approaching within 100 feet of his church, unless it pertained to city business. However, the order also precluded him from harassing me. Even better, Robin was included in the order, and their sole means of communication with me was through my attorney, Burt Young. When I informed Sonny Bono, our assistant district attorney, of how I had surreptitiously placed the USB stick into the collection plate for Robert to discover, she actually laughed. Bruce had demanded trespassing charges be filed, but since the church was public property, he had no legal standing. Robert lost his position, but secured a more advantageous role at the Presbyterian church across town. Bruce, likely attempting to minimize attention to the scandal, did not contest the proceedings. 2 days later, Burt called. "We are scheduled to appear before Judge Sonia Kagan in 2 weeks," he informed me. "She is a stern individual and tends to favor wives, but since you already own the residence, she cannot unduly disadvantage you." "What about alimony?" I inquired. "That is the aspect I find unfavorable. She consistently awards it, even to individuals engaged in infidelity." At work, things were proceeding smoothly. My supervisor, a recent college graduate, was astute enough to grant me considerable autonomy. 2 other quadrant supervisors were reasonable. They did not micromanage, but worked collaboratively with their teams. Then there was Marvin Taylor. Marvin was the most detrimental quadrant supervisor, distrustful of his leads and unsupportive of his crews, the kind of individual one actively avoided. Most employees stated they would rather endure the excruciating pain of plucking their body hair with tweezers than interact with him. Some speculated he possessed compromising information on individuals within City Hall. Others were convinced he was the mayor's clandestine lover. the sole logical explanation for his continued employment. Unfortunately, today was my unlucky day. Marvin sauntered into my office, settling into a chair. "So, Jackie boy," he sneered, "I hear you're going through a divorce. Did she catch you screwing the cat?" I had no intention of divulging the truth to this scoundrel. "Nah," I replied. "I just got tired of her nonsense." "You got a judge yet?" "Yeah, Kagan." Marvin snorted derisively. "That hag screwed my boy over. Gave his brother love and X'd the house, the kids. Now Jeff has to foot the bill for both." I sighed. Marvin never hesitated before speaking. In a single sentence, he had managed to insult 2 ethnic groups. I wondered if he ever spoke in such a manner around Jimmy Raines. Jimmy was Marvin's foreman, a 65-year-old, 240-pound former Giants linebacker. The man appeared capable of eliminating you for the slightest perceived transgression. However, after a couple of drinks, he was remarkably entertaining. One evening at Mob's, Jimmy decided to provoke some fraternity members. Every time one of them got up to use the restroom, he would follow, arms crossed, simply staring. They all left without ever utilizing the facilities. Zeke, the imposing bartender, eventually instructed him to cease intimidating the college students and bought us a complimentary pitcher for the entertainment. Indeed, Jimmy was hilarious, but I doubted he would find Marvin's use of racial slurs amusing. Fortunately, Jimmy saved me from further unpleasantness. He appeared in my doorway, arms crossed. "Marvin, let's go. New guys screwed up the storm drain installation again." Marvin groaned but stood up, exclaiming, "Damn fools. Got to do everything myself." As they departed, I silently thanked Jimmy for his impeccable timing. Too bad he wouldn't be able to extricate me from my impending encounter with Judge Kagan in 2 weeks. What kind of communist nonsense is this? Judge Sonia Kagan remained unfazed as I unleashed my tirade. This vindictive woman had just granted my ex-wife's request for couples counseling. When I flatly refused, she threatened me with incarceration. I turned to Bert, pleading, "Come on, you imbecile, tell her therapy is not happening. I simply want to be rid of this hussy and her clergyman ex-associates." Bruce slumped as if wishing to vanish. Cheryl glared daggers. If looks could annihilate, I would be meeting St. Peter. I had subpoenaed Bruce and Cheryl as witnesses. They had contested it, but after being threatened with charges for failure to appear, they had no alternative. Their congregation had dwindled to 10 clueless members, likely remaining for the next scandal. The once 20-member choir now consisted of Cheryl, Robin, and old man Charles Brown, who appeared one breath away from a cardiac event. Then Robin stepped forward and began to offer her justifications. "It was just Zach," I scoffed. Would she accept that excuse if I had been caught with her best friend, Becky? "Jack works a lot, and I felt neglected," she added. "Nonsense," I retorted. "I work 74 hours, Monday through Friday. In the past year, I have been called away for emergencies 4 times. "My first encounter with Bruce was merely out of curiosity," she admitted. "I heard he was bigger than average." I rolled my eyes. Curiosity, the classic excuse of a promiscuous woman, ranked 3rd, right after neglect, and it was just Zach. Tuning her out, I reminisced about when I first met her. Homecoming at Southern Colorado State, a legendary event. No one cared about the actual game. It was all about the parties, particularly Willie Barnes's annual bonfire. Willie was 45 and still hosting parties for inebriated college girls. 5 years later, he was arrested, accused by 6 women of assault. He was convicted on 3 counts. That homecoming, Robin's junior year, was special, SCS actually won. I was not a student. I performed city maintenance and campus work part-time to save for my own studies. Since the team's victory cleanup was postponed, it meant I could party. By 11 o'clock that night, the parking lot was still quite full, though a good portion of the vehicles seemed to be abandoned, perhaps housing clandestine meetings. I wandered off to find a private spot, unzipped and relieved myself against a car's grill. Just as I finished, headlights flickered on inside. A brunette's head was resting on some fellow's lap. She glanced my way. "Oops, my apologies," I mumbled, zipping up and heading back towards the bonfire. I just popped open a cold one when I spotted her again, the same woman. I discreetly circled the fire, trying to avoid her. The last thing I needed was to be identified as the guy who had urinated on her companion's vehicle. Unfortunately, a group of boisterous fraternity brothers recognized me. "Jack, my man," they bellowed, embracing me. Oddly, I only knew one of them. As they clapped me on the back, I felt a hand brush my hip. It was the brunette. She walked away without a word. The next morning, while getting ready for work, I reached into my jeans for my wallet and felt something else in my other pocket. It was a note. "If you liked what you saw as much as I liked what I saw, call me. Robin." A number was scribbled below. I spent the day cleaning up remnants from the homecoming festivities, pondering if the note was genuine. By the afternoon break, I decided to call. A woman answered. "Hello, may I speak to Robin?" I inquired. "She's not here. Can I take a message?" After a brief pause, I replied, "Yes, please tell her the gentleman from the party called and that he enjoyed what he observed." I left my number and hung up. That evening, my phone rang. "Yeah, I don't know your name, but I've seen your package. Should I just call you Moby?" My heart sank. Had I mistakenly given my phone number to the wrong person? I forced a chuckle. Jack will do just fine. "Robin, right?" she confirmed. "Want to meet at Frankie's Inn in an hour?" I hesitated. Was this a setup for a prank? "What the heck?" I agreed. "Great," she said. "I'll be wearing..." She described her attire in detail, right down to her earrings. I took a seat at Frankie's Cafe, keeping an eye on the entrance. I'd left my Broncos jersey at home just in case a quick escape was necessary. 20 minutes later, she walked in, dressed precisely as she described, looking even more stunning than I'd imagined. I waved. She spotted me, her brows furrowing slightly, then made her way over, brushing aside a few guys who tried to intercept her. She sat down with a smirk. "Funny-looking Broncos jersey," she commented. I shrugged. Didn't want to risk a prank. Her grin widened. "Afraid I'd catfish you?" "More like I wanted a quick escape if you weren't as advertised," she laughed. "Fair enough." We chatted over coffee and pie until closing. We dated for about a month before things began to get serious. That Saturday, I knew it was time. I even called Bruce and told him I was serious. He delivered a lengthy speech about true love and not breaking hearts. Ironically, 10 years later, he would be instrumental in breaking mine. I chuckled at the irony, apparently aloud, because both Robin and Dr. Landers were staring at me. "Do you find Robin's pain amusing, Mr. Erickson?" "More like my own," I retorted. "I owe Gary Wayne an apology." Robin frowned. She hadn't actually done anything with Gary, but she had become involved with Justin Laurie, the man she had been intimately with at the party. It was rumored that 2 days after their date, Gary wasn't adequate for her. "Why would you owe him an apology?" she asked. "Because I punched him for telling the truth." Dr. Landers leaned forward. "And what truth was that?" I smirked. "He called Robin Big Bird, always looking for a bigger limb to perch on. I don't follow, Landers stated. She's a size queen. Robin turned a bright shade of red, silent. Busted, I continued. She dumped Gary for being small, then took one look at me and dumped Justin. Now she's got Bruce because his meat's even bigger. It's all just filthy, stupid crap. If you say it's just sex, I'll leave now, do my jail time for contempt, then move to Afghanistan, where adulterous witches get treated right. They both looked stunned. Landers collected herself. Now, Robin, we must realize that Neanderthal thinking doesn't comprehend multiple partners in a happy marriage. I narrowed my eyes. What the hell are you rambling about? A lot of happily married couples enjoy multiple partners, she said. Some men, knowing they aren't enough, derive pleasure from sharing their wife with a superior specimen. My brain felt like it had short-circuited. I had read about men who willingly took a back seat in their relationships, allowing their partners to seek fulfillment elsewhere while they remained on the sidelines. There aren't enough pills in the world to make me enjoy that kind of nonsense, I declared. I don't care what those pathetic losers get off on. No way in hell am I watching my wife get pounded, and I'd put a bullet in her head before I'd ever clean up after her. Now, Jack, Landers said calmly, don't you think you owe it to your marriage to be open-minded? No one's saying you have to watch. Although you could if you wanted, Robin chimed in, purring. It'd be so hot, and I could even service you afterward. I glared. Screw you, ho. You think I want Bruce's sloppy seconds? I suppose next you'll tell me how hot it would be for me to wear pink underwear while you and Bruce screw, I added. Maybe even sleep in a cave at the foot of the bed. Robin smirked. Oh no, Jack. We'd let you sleep in your own bed. I shot out of my chair. I'm done. I'm out of here. The receptionist looked up, ready to call for assistance. Mr. Erickson, Landers said firmly, you were ordered to attend these sessions. Walk out, and you'll face jail time for contempt. I turned back and stared her down. I've been here an hour. Tell the black-robed hag whatever you want. I don't give a rat's ass. It'll be a cold day in hell before I get near that skank again. I jabbed a finger at Robin. And I'll be talking to my lawyers about getting your license pulled, you psychotic fraud. As I walked out, I felt better than I had in months. I stormed into Bert's office. His face fell. Tell me you didn't eliminate anyone. He sighed. I'd love to say no, but unfortunately, no. I muttered. I probably said some things they won't like, though. I recounted everything to him, how rehearsed the session felt, how the counselor was obviously biased. Jack, you're not the first to complain, Bert said, but any complaints get buried. I'd have warned you, but that'd be tampering. I'm not going back, Bert. That fat-ass Jell-O mold can jail me, but I'm not sitting through 3 more hours of that. Bert sighed. I'll have David Crosby make some calls. Stay out of trouble, Jack. We'll end this soon. I had 3 beers. I needed a drink. Flipping between Jerry Springer and professional wrestling, I probably looked like a real winner by the time the baseball game came on. I was just the right amount of buzzed. Then I heard thunder. I stepped outside. Dark storm clouds were rolling over downtown. The air had a chill, a bad one. One of those nasty summer hailstorms was coming. Sure enough, the phone rang, but it wasn't about the hail. My crew and I spent the night hauling sand and clearing debris. By 4 a.m, the river was threatening the dikes and the Lime Road Bridge. The Army Corps of Engineers insisted the dike was fine. The county said the bridge was stable. While they debated, we got to work. By 9 a.m. Friday, I finally pulled into my driveway. No chance of catching my wife with Bruce this time, mostly because I no longer had a wife and I no longer gave a damn who Johnny was. Running on a mix of coffee and NOS energy drinks, I figured a shot of Jägermeister would knock me out. I downed the bottle and crashed on the couch. I woke up to knocking. I checked my phone, 11 p.m. Outside, I saw Brenda. McBain? What in blazes does she want? I opened the door. Apologies for disturbing you, Jack, she said, shifting her weight. But I believe there's something you ought to see. It might even be beneficial for your divorce proceedings. I hesitated, wondering what she could possibly reveal. It was then, for the very first time, that I noticed her eyes, a striking shade of gray. She said something I didn't quite catch, then turned and walked towards her vehicle. Even operating on autopilot, I understood I was expected to follow. She got in, and I settled into the passenger seat. We drove in silence. I found myself gazing at her long, shapely legs. She noticed, and a smirk widened. Brenda pulled into the parking lot of an abandoned power plant. The city had acquired these structures years ago. Developers had attempted to bid for them, but the city board consistently rejected their proposals. The reasoning remained a mystery. Meanwhile, the city had invested a considerable sum in security measures. 2 years prior, they'd even erected a 10-foot chain-link fence around the perimeter. We parked, and an unsettling feeling washed over me. There are too many vehicles. Brenda, why are we here? If we're caught, this is serious trouble. Just trust me, she replied, stepping out. This is going to help you. I had no clue how trespassing could aid my divorce, but I followed her. She guided me to a tier in the fence, then towards a basement window of the old King James Hotel. A faint sliver of light emanated from within. This was impossible. The power had been disconnected years ago. I crouched down, peered inside, and gasped. Brenda handed me a camcorder. On the drive back, she explained how she and Tommy had been observing Bruce and Robin one evening. They'd overheard them discussing this location, so they followed them. So, I mused, choir practice is merely a ruse? She looked sheepish. Don't worry, you and Tommy aren't part of this. A silence stretched between us before she suddenly blurted out, You know, the only reason Tommy and I are intimate is because no one else wants us. I hadn't even mentioned their illicit relationship. Oh, that's not true, I lied. Perhaps some guys might find me appealing, she muttered, but no one wants to be seen with me. I hear the jokes, Jack. Butterface, you know. Butcher body, butterface. I remained silent. They call me a three-bagger. One over my head, one over his in case mine falls off, and a third at the door in case someone walks in. I felt utterly terrible. I'm good enough for sex in the dark, but not for a date. Brenda, come on, I said, injecting forced conviction into my voice. If I were your age, I'd be all over you. It was a complete fabrication, but she had just provided me with invaluable information, and she was on the verge of tears. You've helped me out tremendously, I continued. Let me take you out for dinner tomorrow. Get dressed up. I'll pick you up at 7. She hesitated. I'm going to Denver tomorrow. I won't be back until Sunday. No problem. Rain check. A small smile. Deal. I got out and went inside. I had them exactly where I wanted them. The following morning, I made a few calls. By Thursday, everything was in motion. I contacted Bert first. This could be construed as extortion, he sighed, but I do believe it will be effective. No wonder that shrew gets away with everything. Next, I called Mike Starr. We'd been pals in high school, and he was now an investigative reporter. I handed him the video and the details. I've heard whispers about this, he admitted. They also meet on Wednesdays. So, what's the plan? He grinned. I'll stake out the hotel and bust them live on television. Perfect. On Monday morning, I walked into the city maintenance director's office with a proposal, one that would resolve a storage issue and cut off access to the King James Hotel. He liked it. Since the city owned the land, all that was required was rezoning. No budget request or city board intervention was necessary. As I was leaving, he stopped me. Jack, I'm recommending you for a promotion. You've just saved us $500,000. By Wednesday, approvals were secured, and I was put in charge of a 10-man crew with 3 weeks to complete the task. On Thursday morning, we began transporting fencing materials to the old power plant. At noon, I left for my counseling session with Dr. Landers at 1 o'clock. I arrived early. The receptionist glared before buzzing me through. Landers sat behind her desk, smug as ever. Mr. Erickson, I'm surprised to see you here early. Even one-on-one is new for you, isn't it? She blinked. Excuse me. I crossed my arms. I'm done with this charade. I'm not returning, and I'm not paying for it. She smirked. Judge Kagan ordered these sessions. If you refuse, screw you. Choke on the biggest piece. Her eyes narrowed. You're going to call Kagan and tell her the game is up. I know about your little spouse-swapping club at the King James. Her face drained of color. I'm sure the legal and ethics boards would love to hear how a family court judge and a marriage counselor run a damn sex club, especially when all the cheating wives seem to win in Kagan's court, while their non-member husbands get screwed. There is no such. Shut up, witch. I saw you. I saw them. I saw the elk head wearing a fireman's hat with rubbers on its antlers. She turned ghost white. Mike Starr already had the footage. He also knew who had been blocking the property sales for years. Kagan and her husband were about to lose everything. I turned at the door. Screw you, and I walked out. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach as the door to Dr. Lander's office buzzed open. Jack was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago. Bruce and my attorney, Justin Bieber, yes, that was his actual name, had assured me that Landers and Kagan would either persuade Jack to reconsider or at least stall long enough for him to give up. I had dressed with deliberate care, a shorter skirt, no stockings, my hair styled the way he used to like it, and the same perfume I wore on our last anniversary. But Jack was nowhere to be found. Dr. Landers seemed visibly unsettled. I assumed she had a personal emergency and had to cancel our session. Disappointment hit me hard. As much as I feared his resentment, I still wanted to see him. I wasn't even permitted near our old house anymore. I couldn't even stand on the balcony if he was home. Is Jack really willing to risk jail just to avoid this session? I asked. She hesitated before answering. There's no session today, Robin. I'll call you later. She unlocked the door, signaling me to leave. As I stepped out, I glanced back. Her previously composed expression was now rattled. With unexpected free time on my hands, I drove to the church. Tomorrow was the private gathering, and I was eager. I planned to experience something new. Bruce and Terry Kagan would both be involved, making it an unforgettable night. The mere thought sent shivers of anticipation through me. But when I arrived, Bruce was on the phone looking furious. That was Terry, he muttered, rubbing his forehead. Club's off tonight. Jack knows everything. He's threatening to involve his friend, Mike Starr, if this gets out. A lot of people are going down. Bruce exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. You know what? He said, his tone colder than I'd ever heard it. I'm starting to regret getting involved with you, Robin. You're not worth all this trouble. I froze. Just a few months ago, he couldn't get enough of me. He constantly compared me to Cheryl, always placing me above her. But now, simply because Jack was fighting back, I was suddenly disposable. That evening after dinner, my lawyer called. "The hearing's been moved up," he said. "It's happening tomorrow." Why? The only time I've seen a judge rush a hearing like this is when the petitioner withdraws their divorce request. Could Jack be facing contempt charges? Doubtful, Bieber replied. If that were the case, we'd be required to be there too. Just get some rest. I've got a good feeling about tomorrow. Bruce's mood lifted when he heard the news. Perhaps someone had pressured Jack into backing down. There were powerful figures involved. Jack might have had guts, but he had no real influence. That night, the sex was incredible. I lost count of how many times I climaxed. Bruce, Cheryl, and I spent an unforgettable night together. By 10 the next morning, I was seated in Judge Kagan's courtroom. Jack wasn't there, but his lawyer was, along with another man. "Will Jack face any consequences for not showing up?" I whispered to Justin. "Unlikely," he replied, glancing at the unfamiliar man. "He's probably licking his wounds. What I don't understand is why Graham Nash is here. He hasn't set foot in a courtroom in years. Something's going on." Judge Kagan entered and called the court to order. Jack's lawyer, Nash, and Justin approached the bench, whispering among themselves for nearly 20 minutes. When Justin finally returned to my side, his face was troubled. Before I could ask what was happening, the gavel struck. In 90 days, the marriage of Jack and Robin Erickson will be officially dissolved, Kagan announced. Robin Erickson will receive no spousal support. Mr. Erickson will transfer 25% of his retirement funds and 40% of their liquid assets to her. I turned to Justin, stunned. "What just happened?" "Kagan granted Jack's petition," he muttered. The next thing I knew, I was coming to with an EMT standing over me. Within 3 weeks, everything crumbled. The spouse swapping club was exposed in the media. Judge Kagan was removed from the bench, and her husband was charged with pill trafficking. Justin Bieber was disbarred. It turned out he had been secretly sleeping with male clients and deliberately botching cases for Kagan. He was also linked to a high school pill ring. Dr. Landers was ordered to refund her patients. A few days later, she was found dead in her bathtub, wrists slit. Her husband was slumped over the toilet with a gunshot wound to the head. Bruce lost his position in the ministry. His severance barely covered the cost of relocating. Cheryl, sick of his insatiable sex drive, divorced him after catching him pleasuring himself while watching their neighbors. He blamed me for everything, then left without a backward glance. With nowhere else to go, I moved into a tiny apartment with Cheryl while we both tried to rebuild our lives. I used most of my divorce settlement to set up utilities and hire her a decent lawyer. Bruce, desperate and out of options, tried to hire Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young for legal representation. They refused. He ended up with some no-name attorney he found in a classified ad. Cheryl destroyed him in court. Last I heard, he was preaching somewhere in Iowa. After my divorce was finalized, I found a job at an accounting firm. Cheryl got work with a contractor and eventually started dating one of his employees. I didn't date. I wanted Jack. Sometimes I would walk past our old house, hoping to see him one day. I saw a "sold" sign out front. It shattered me. That night, I drowned my sorrow in a hot dog and chips. While walking past the frozen food aisle at the grocery store, I saw him, Jack. He was reaching for a frozen pizza. Before I even realized what I was doing, I was on my knees sobbing, pleading with him in the middle of the store. I don't even remember what I said, but when I finally looked up, Jack was staring at me, clearly uncomfortable. A small crowd had gathered. He smirked, then pointed at his backside and said, "Eat my dirt and die." Then he walked away. Las Vegas, Nevada. 4 years later, I pulled into my driveway, eyeing the overgrown lawn. I'd mow it Saturday at dawn before the Vegas heat kicked in. The door barely shut before my wife's arms wrapped around me, her lips pressing against mine. "Hey, baby," she murmured. "Did you keep the tourists from scamming the slot machines today?" I chuckled. "Same old Brenda. And next month, when you graduate, you'll be slaving for the man too, at least until you knock me up." She smirked, studying me. "Yeah, but I have to watch Samantha around you. She can't stop staring at your..." I laughed. Had a neighbor like that once, always watching me mow the lawn. Brenda smirked. "Especially Robin. Her loss," she said, shaking her head. "My gain." "Damn right." I grabbed my keys. "So I'll grab a few pizzas. You college girls eat like linebackers." She kissed me again as I walked out. Brenda and I had been married 3 years. I reached Vegas 3 days after leaving Stoneham. Some people probably think I'm an asshole for leaving Robin stranded in that motel in Casper, Wyoming, but I would never trust that cheating witch again. She was barely asleep when I slipped out, paid for 3 nights, and disappeared. Made it to Utah before sunrise. 2 days later, I rolled into Vegas. Within a week, I had a job and an apartment. Sold my house and cashed my retirement. Bought a new place. 2 weeks later, Brenda arrived. She had already enrolled at UNLV. While waiting for my house to sell, I spent a lot of time with her. At first, she'd check in on me, bring food, watch movies, go out on weekends. The more time we spent together, the more I liked her. And the best part? I wasn't ashamed to be seen with her. When I told her about Robin crying in the store, she teared up. "Hey," I said, "I have no plans to go back to her." I took her hands. "Brenda, I'm falling for you. If you can stand being with an old guy like me..." Before I finished, she jumped on me. That night, after 3 rounds, the first fevered and hot, the next 2 slow and loving, I laid out my plan. I expected Tom and Jerry to flip. Instead, Tom nodded. "Jack," he said, "you've always been rough around the edges, but I can't imagine our daughter in better hands." I froze. Jerry grinned. Brenda had been their daughter all along. A year after we moved to Vegas, she learned new makeup techniques, changed her hair. She'd always been pretty, but now she glowed. We married after her freshman year. I told her, "If you ever meet a guy your age, I'll understand." She ignored me for a week. "You stupid asshole," she finally said. "I've only had eyes for one man." She grabbed my face. "I watched the wrong woman throw you away. I'll be damned if I let you go." I still keep in touch with people back home. Cheryl married a tile guy and moved to California. Robin? She crawled back to Stoneham 2 years after I stranded her in Wyoming, married a rancher. A year later, he caught her running a train with 3 of his ranch hands. Booted her. Figures. The pimply-faced kid behind the counter handed me my pizzas. If I got home fast enough, Brenda would probably jump me before her study group showed up. Me? I'd retreat to my den, kick back, and watch the Rockies on my MLB pass. From one risky woman to another, my life is as smooth as a well-oiled machine in the morning.